Good morning. I'm Lou Cataruza. Dr. Eva Ritvo and I had a wonderful interview with Nancy Ryan about her near-death experience and other great insights. Nancy was hit by a truck, dragged 150 feet, and had 100 bones shattered. She spent 45 days in recovery. Her doctors expected it to take 100. She then wrote several books. Her bestseller was called Awakening from the Light. You can buy it from Amazon. She was also interviewed on NBC's TV's Today Show, and she was a scientist before her NDE and after she became an artist, writer, and inspirational speaker. Our interview speaks to the correlation between Nancy Ryan's near-death experience, Dr. Eva Ritvo's medical perspective, and my own spiritual awakening that has changed the way we all are living a satisfying life. Hi, everyone. Welcome, friends. Today's discussion on living a satisfying life with Dr. Eva will be with Nancy Rynes. And after I get to ask a few of my own questions, Dr. Eva will take over. What made me so interested in having this discussion is the many NDEs, near-death experiences, I've watched on YouTube. I'm sure you've done the same. If you haven't watched her interview with Rick Archer on Buddha at the gas pump on YouTube, do that. It will amaze you. Rick was great, and you, Nancy, looked like you had a great time. I found it so inspiring. Now, you have written a book on your experience and have spoken to many people about it, including being on the on NBC Today Show. You can also, by the way, find her book on Amazon called Awakening from the Light. The book provides practical steps to incorporate spiritual wisdom into your life on this earth. A few months ago, I posed this question to a well-known scientist, Nancy. Is it not true that if intention starts at a beginning, then something or someone must be willing? The scientist was quite perplexed by that question and said he would have to think about it. So for me, that was the great intender. Some call her God. That conclusion, plus observing and experiencing how beautiful the complex and our biology has evolved, that it's given me really a reason to believe that this is not a random act, but very much a purposeful one. I go a step further, making a conclusion that our human purpose is to fulfill the intender, creator's purpose, by becoming enlightened creators ourselves. Enlightened to the fact that our ability to perform that intention, we have to be, must be the best we can be, both physically and mentally. Science has made a statement to the fact that we are wired to cause our joy, health, and satisfaction, those elements that are necessary. They could occur on demand when we have a contributing mindset to our body, mind, and everyone and everything else. When we are that way, our hormones, oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, are released to make our body and mind function optimally with joy, love, and satisfaction as a product of that way of being. You know, I've just been connecting the dots, and it makes a lot of sense for me. I hope it makes sense to you, Nancy, as well. I've come to this conclusion, and now I live my life from that conclusion, that our fundamental purpose for our existence is first to become enlightened about our free will. We can choose to call on our negative or positive force. We are responsible. Then clearly understand what science has demonstrated, that having a contributing mindset causes our own well-being and that of the human condition. If the whole world got that, there would be an explosion of ideas to go out and seed the universe, promote that awareness, and that way of being. That may be the way to eliminate hunger, pain, and suffering. Yeah, well, with that, Nancy, here's my first question. In your experience, from that place where you traveled to, I know everyone that I heard said that the energy there was a positively charged one, like the experience of the force of love. Was there any negative force there?
As far as I remember, and I when I was there, it was just astounding to me how positive it was, and that I couldn't really detect anything negative. So the way that I came to understand it pretty quickly was, and I use the word love here as kind of a, I didn't know what else to call this positive underlayment, so I just used the term love because that's really all I could think of. But what I came to kind of realize, at least the way that I came to understand it, was that wherever this was that I was, this other part of our life, or this other part of our reality, the deepest part of our reality, was effectively formed or based on this love, this positive energy, this ultimate kind of universal kindness and compassion. It's bigger. It was, to me, bigger than just a feeling, just a feeling state. Like humans often say, I love you, I love my daughter, I love my dogs, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was deeper than that. It was this all pervasive kind of positive energy that went everywhere, and I was a part of that. Everybody was a part of that. It wasn't just me. It was
Mm-hmm.
everyone was a part of it, whether they wanted to be or not, or whether they knew they were a part of it or not. So it was just this positive force of energy that was really the structure of everything, especially the structure of this physical life that
Yeah,
we're in right now.
yeah,
Not just the other life, this one too.
yeah, I got it. Yeah, that's where it's my contention after watching and listening, not only to yours, but to all these other NDEs, and that creation occurred at a point where the Big Bang, as an example, started with an intention from the divine to generate a material realm. It did so by using negative and positive forces, creating the energy that spun. Now we're getting to physics, that spun, that then created what we call the dance of time and space. That motion eventually created what the intender expected for it to fit the equation of existence. Similar, and I equate it this way, similar to the intention of turning a key to open a door, where the exact calibration that we intend by having the key made to fit results in the door opening.
Mm-hmm.
It's that calibration of energy, spin, and time that may have birthed the Big Bang. So my theory is, for the matter to have occurred, the negative and positive force was needed to come together and spin until they found a perfect calibration and generated an orgasmic explosion and discharged the calibrated energy, forming matter and the fields of negative and positive to continue. It's one of many evolutionary calibration processes, survival of the fittest, to continue birthing the expansion of the universe and all that is possible. It's that intended calibration that is realized in our evolutionary process. I mean, it's all calibrated. We are an expression of that realm of all that is possible existing in the material realm, with a negative and positive we use to emulate the intended calibration process. We're just doing what it did. We're constant creators. It seems to me that you have found out what your purpose and our purpose as human beings are, and that is to work towards manifesting the force of love by adopting a contributing mindset. It's that force of love that permeated throughout when you were there in that realm that you just defined as you call it love, but it's this sense of unconditional energy that is positive. It's positive. It only can manifest in the material realm when it has a negative charge. Positive charge, negative charge creates the spin, creates the possibility for a big bang to occur. That's my theory. Now, the ability to understand our true purpose, to manifest a universe that emulates the expression that exists in the realm where only positive love exists. There are some questions like, if we all came to that conclusion, Nancy, as you have experienced, could people just choose to deal with challenges in their life by giving up the existence so they don't suffer? Or is suffering necessary, as it is a negative force that is needed for progress to occur?
Yeah, I think it is often necessary for us to, if you want to call us as individual souls, at some level we're all connected and we're all one, but we also have these individual expressions that we're in here, as these people that we are. We, as in the human condition, we often seem to have to go through some sort of a suffering process, or at least a school of hard knocks. It's kind of how I like to look at it.
Yeah.
In order to come to that deeper realizations, whatever those realizations are, and it could be like in my case, when I was a little kid, I was exceedingly spiritual, like off the charts. And it's suspected that I had an NDE when I was very young. But I don't know. But I was a very, very spiritual young girl. And I felt this way as a little kid, like before anybody could teach this to me, like we were all connected. We were here to learn. We were here, to love each other, all that. I had all that in my head. And then I moved away from that in my teens, but it came back again during this NDE that we're talking about here. And it was obvious to me after I looked at what happened to me and really allowed it to sink in, is that I needed to go through that period of in some respects, like suffering, being apart from this knowledge, being separated from that love, being separated from that deeper reality, that deeper spiritual reality. I had to experience that pain of separation in order to make this bigger progress now in coming to this realization. Like the one thing that I came away with immediately when I woke up in that recovery room after my surgery, and when I started talking to my friends, the first thing I said, two things that I said: everything is connected by love. And I didn't even know where that was coming from. I kept saying that to people, and they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? I said, it's all connected by love. Like, this was a huge revelation to me. And, and then the second part of that was that I was a part of it intimately. It was all, it was all coming through me, and that I could choose. The more I chose, and you're talking about intention, the more that I chose or intended to be, like every day, make an intention, set that intention to be a part of this love, to further that love. If that's the only thing that I would do for the rest of my life, like if that's the only spiritual thing I focused on the rest of my life, was learning how to immerse myself and be this love, then that would be, honestly, that would be the best thing I could do for myself long term. Yeah. So if that's all any of us do, is make that intention, and it's not always easy. It's a simple concept that's not always easy to follow, but if you can make that intention when you get up in the morning and say, today I'm going to just be that love as much as possible, not only for other people, but for myself, and get myself aligned with that higher divine love. If that's all I do, then that will be a successful day. That's going to be putting me on the path to fulfilling my purpose here. And that's a big purpose for a lot of us. I think for a lot of people, whether they have other, other reasons for this life, and that, could be debated on for days and days.
Yeah.
But what the underlying thing for all of us is really to come back to being that state of love for ourselves and everyone else. That's like the core message for everybody.
So if we as humans understand what our true purpose for having a life was, to be creators and bring to the creative process in everything we do, the expression of love, which is a contributing mindset, making a difference
Right.
to others, in my opinion, transform the understanding of this world in a
Yeah.
profound way. There is no other purpose that you're meant to, and you can understand that clearly by understanding your biology.
Yeah.
You are meant to cause these wonderful chemicals in you to put you in a state of well-being. It was designed that way. You need to understand that that's what the designer, the divine, has set up in motion. That's what you're here for. Now you have a choice, because that choice is extremely important to understand, that you could choose to be vengeful and even release hormones that make you feel powerful. There are those there, but you have a choice, and that choice then defines whether or not you fit in that survival of the fittest. Because the fittest is the person that understands the realm of love and the joy of a life.
That's a really important point. And we don't, the thing is that you don't necessarily have to, like you and I do, believe in some divine power to be able to live this way, right?
That's
You
right.
can
Exactly.
you can be anybody and say, well, if I make this choice to live in kindness, from a place of compassion, from a place of contribution, if I make that choice every day to live in alignment with what I feel is good for me and the planet and in the world, if I
Yep.
truly live that, it doesn't matter if you believe something different from me. That
That's right.
core action is really what's important. It's the love, the kindness, the compassion, the gratitude. And if we all live that way, no matter what our different belief systems
That's right.
were,
That's right.
that would contribute to an amazing
Exactly.
place.
And that's what we're here to do. We're here
Yeah.
to tell that message to everyone. You don't have to believe in anything. You're just wired already for that. Just be aware
Right.
of that.
Yeah.
Well, this was a very beautiful discussion, and I'm happy to be part of it. I, of course, have a lot of questions for Nancy. I'm delighted to meet you and really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. We've thrown around the word science for the last 15 minutes or so, and I understand you have a background in science. Can you tell us about that?
Sure thing. When I was a little kid, the two things, well, I wanted to be three things when I was a little kid. I wanted to be an archaeologist, um, or a paleontologist, one of the two. I wanted to dig stuff up and I wanted to learn about the past. And nowadays we do that through one of the sciences, archaeology or paleontology. And then I also wanted to be an artist. So I am definitely the latter right now. And I have had time as an archaeologist, not as a paleontologist, but my schooling is a geologist. I thought, well, if I go to school and I want to be one of these, I wasn't really sure yet what I wanted to do, when I got to university. So I thought, well, if I go into geology, I could easily transition into being either a paleontologist, which digs up dead animals, or an archaeologist, somebody who looks at past civilizations. So I thought that's a cool way to start off my career. So I went in, got my undergrad, and I ended up in grad school studying something that wasn't quite exactly related to digging stuff up. I studied paleoclimate, ancient climates, and it was exceedingly fascinating. I didn't have a physics background in like atmospheric physics or anything, so I studied it really from a historical perspective. So what is what was climate doing in the past, and can we learn from that, for today? And my field work, I did two separate field work studies. One was in Alaska, and then the other was in Greenland, in Southeast Greenland. So I did a lot of studies in remote sensing, which is satellite imagery. I was actually hired later by the Department of Energy to work as, as a satellite, kind of a satellite remote sensing analyst. And I've done a lot of that work as well. So kind of into the technical side of like looking at the Earth from above and trying to kind of get a bigger view of what's going on and help other scientists as well kind of get their models put together. So really, I did spend some time as in archaeology, and especially as an archaeological artist, which I loved. And then that kind of, it's not that it dried up, it's that my life moved on in a different direction, and my family needed, my mom and dad had some physical health challenges, so I decided to stay closer by them, and then moved kind of more into the computer side of the sciences, the engineering piece of it. So I have a pretty good background in the natural sciences. Archaeology was my minor. Again, geology and paleoclimate was what I was really studying. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I've done, but I've also spent a lot of time in my professional career. Really, I took all that knowledge and became a science writer. So I have a pretty good grasp of being able to communicate well with a lot of different people. And as a former scientist, active scientist, I thought, well, I need to be able, people need to learn about the sciences from a more, well, I should say from a less technical perspective. So that's where I fit in really well. I was able to make that translation between active research scientists and the lay public. And that's something that I really, really I enjoyed it. I spent I'm not going to say several decades, but at least a couple of decades working on that. So that's kind of where I am today.
It's so beautiful that your background fits so perfectly with what you're doing, right? So your interest was in figuring things out from the past.
Right.
So we kind of have two careers, and now after your near-death experience, you're trying still to figure things out from the past. And you also used your gift of being able to communicate really complex things and make them understandable. And I just heard you do that so beautifully with Lou, right? You took all that experience that you had and you just synthesized it into that one sentence that you told everybody as you emerge, right? That everything is connected through love.
Right.
So you used all of your experiences so well to get you to this point where you're at now. And now you're helping lots of people understand maybe more than meets the eye, which is what scientists do, right? A lot of people are fearful of vaccines. They don't understand it. The more we understand things, the less we are fearful. And you're helping us all be a lot less fearful about our existence here, about our struggling, and even about our own mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an honor to get to hear you from all that background to where you are now. So you made a big shift. Your career was going one way, and now you're doing something completely different. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was the quintessential engineer slash scientist before my NDE, in that I was totally ensconced in the material world. I didn't believe really in spirituality. I mean, I'd had some, back then I used to call them interesting experiences that could have opened my eyes to something bigger or deeper, but I really didn't want to go there. It was just it was too far beyond what I was comfortable with at the time. I was really ensconced in just this physical world and didn't see that there was anything after death. I mean, I was, honest to God, terrified of death before all this happened, to the point where I would wake up in the middle of the night in sheer states of panic at the thought of just not existing anymore. That's where I was. And not a lot of people, I haven't really talked about that too much on these interviews, but I was terrified of death. Absolutely terrified.
What age are you talking about?
So this started I would say probably in my mid 20s and went all the way up to my mid 40s when I had my NDE. So like for 20 years, it was a constant terror of death. Absolutely. And I had no reason, like I wasn't sick or anything, but that it was like a shadow that just existed over my life and I couldn't shake it. And it just colored everything. And it just made me fearful all the way
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what that overwhelming fear, it really hampers your living on a day-to-day basis, at least in a positive, we were talking about positive intention earlier. If you've got that absolute overlying sense of dread or fear, it's really tough to
Yeah.
show up every day in a loving and helpful
Yeah.
way.
If you think about our nervous system, right, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The
Hmm.
parasympathetic, we nickname the tend and befriend, the rest and digest, or you're going to call it love, right? That's
Right.
the opposite side of our nervous system is the arousal, which is the, fight or flight. And that's the fear. So our biology has those polar opposites, right? So we've got the love, the parasympathetic, or we've got the sympathetic, the arousal. And what I'm hearing you say is for some inexplicable reason, but probably because it was all leading up to this, right?
Yeah.
That you were stuck in that fear state.
Yep.
And it was manifesting, even as a young, healthy woman, as a fear of death.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
and it wasn't just that. I was basically afraid of everything, but
we have a powerful instinct to survive and also an instinct to procreate and pass on our genes. That's life, that's love. You feel that that is threatened, you're going to have fear. You want to have fear, right? If a lion is coming at you, you want to be fearful because that
Right.
triggers your arousal, and then you run and then you get to stay alive.
yeah.
So yes, it's very much ingrained in our biology. We're never going to get away from that.
Right.
But I think Nancy is a wonderful example of somebody who was caught in the fear state and had a really powerful transformative experience. And now we could almost say you're sort of caught in the love state, just to be in your presence feels good because you're so calm and your message is so empowering and so delightful. And I think, viewers need to know that if you're in the fear state, that's okay, because it's all about the journey. It's
Yep.
not about the end point. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate you sharing with us that the way we see you now is not the way we might have seen you when you were in your 20s.
Right.
You've evolved and that you've come to this place where you do feel so much love and also so much joy. But
Yep.
it's been work. I know that from listening to you. You didn't
Yeah.
just wake up one day this way. Although
No.
in an ideal state we would. And Lou and I love to look at small children, and we just see the love and the joy can be so innate. And then we layer on, cultural expectations, and we layer on trauma. And some of us, like it sounds like you did, get stuck in a fear-based living.
Yep.
And so now we're here to help people move from that fear-based state to the love-based state. So tell us how you got there.
Yeah, so it's totally doable, and you don't have to die first to have that transformation. Like, a lot of times when I when I used to give talks in person, which I unfortunately haven't been able to do, obviously, for like a year and a half, but people would come up to me afterward and say, well, do I need to have an NDE in order to, make it to this place of being in this state of love all the time? I'm like, no, in fact, I don't recommend it. It's a lot of stuff that I don't want to get into here, but there's a lot of work that you have to do just dealing with the NDE itself, let alone coming out of it and taking away like spiritual progress or spiritual changes or life changes from that. It's a big trauma, especially if it's like me and you get hit by a truck. That's literally what happened to me. It's not, I'm not being, metaphorical when I say that. That's literally what happened. And so there's a lot of just physical healing, that you have to deal with with this too. But yeah, you can absolutely. The first thing is the desire to do so. You a lot of times people who will be in the presence of someone who has made that shift, whether it was by meditation or whatever they've done to get their an NDE some kind of other spiritual experience, they'll be in the presence of someone like that and they'll be like, that's what I want. Now I know what it looks like and feels like. That's what I want in my life. I didn't actually, they may not have been able to put their finger on it before, but it's that peace, it's that being contented, being in a state of joy or love all the time or most of the time, that people, they don't even know that they want it until they see it.
It,
And that's really that's one of the reasons I do these talks, is even if I can't meet you in person, hopefully when you see people like me, you'll get that, oh, that sense of that's what I want, that calm state of peaceful presence. um, the Dalai Lama has it, Thich Nhat Hanh has it. I've met so many people that have that peaceful
yeah,
presence,
yeah.
and you don't have to die first to get it. But it is, you do have to take dedicated steps. It still is a journey, even if you have the most transformative experience on the planet. It's still going to take you a concerted effort to really bring that into your life and make it a part of your life every day. You can live in a state, I call it joy. Not to me, happiness can be fleeting. The way that I define happiness might be different from you, but for me, it's just living from that state of joy,
Joy,
inner
joy
joy,
is a perfect
inner
word for it.
peace.
Yeah,
And I can be that way even if other things in my life are apparently like looking like they're falling apart. Or, for example, in the last 18 months, I've had 7 close friends pass away.
Mm.
Now, one would think, and granted, I do miss them, and they're leaving this planet did affect me, but still, I can't. There's that underlying sense of joy and peace that continues even though these other events happen. And I can't control that a friend died of cancer. I wish I could, but I can't. And while I miss her, that doesn't mean I'm going to wallow in that feeling. And it's just a feeling. I know now it's just a feeling of sadness, and it's a valuable feeling to have. Don't get me wrong, people go through grief. I totally get it, because I do too, but that doesn't mean that it has to overshadow every
right.
little bit of your life
Yeah,
and drag you down with it. You can still experience like this underlying, I always think of it as just like this calm sea,
yeah,
this calm state of joy or peace or connectedness or love, no matter what's going on out there, because all
yeah.
stuff's always going to be going on out there, right? Things happen, the hot water heater blows up, or you know
Right.
your kid gets in trouble at school, or whatever it happens to be. But you can still maintain that state of calm, peaceful presence.
Yeah.
And,
I,
and for most people, it's like this intentional thing that they have to work on every day. One thing that happened when I was a teenager, which I don't think I've talked about too much, I was watching a movie with Bill Murray, and this was the mid 80s, maybe even early 80s. I don't remember when, but it was a movie that was exceedingly uncharacteristic for him. Now, I grew up in the Chicago area, and Bill Murray is from Chicago, so he's kind of like this hometown hero. And this movie, I'll never forget it. I don't remember most of the movie, but I remember a piece of it. And it made an impression on me, even though I couldn't quite really understand why at the time. The movie was called The Razor's Edge. And this was the second time this movie had been made. The first version was made, I think, back in the 40s with, I think, Tyrone Power. I was a total like geek with old movies when I was a kid. So I think Tyrone Power starred in the first one. I'm not really sure about that, but this reboot of it was Bill Murray, and the part of the movie was that he was traveling through India kind of to find himself, to find his center of spirituality. It was a big like personal spiritual quest for his character. So he's on, I believe, the Ganges River with his, Indian guide, this man in, typical traditional Indian in costume. And it was like the end of the day. And this guide that he had had cooked dinner, and they were on a boat, I think, in going to sail the next day. But before they were going to turn in for the night, the man who was guiding Bill Murray's character was washing dishes. And I'll never forget this scene. And this man, this, older Indian man, was just deliberately washing dishes. And Bill Murray's character was just standing there watching this guy wash dishes in this very deliberate way. And so he asked about it. He said, what are you doing? Why are you washing the dishes like that? And he said something to the effect of, well, even washing the dishes can be a profound spiritual experience. And, Bill Murray's face lit up and he said, well, you let me do that. I want a piece of that too. So the two of them are in there, washing dishes in this very deliberate way. And I never forgot that scene. Like, even the simplest of things that you do every day, if you do it with intention and deliberation, can be an act of spiritual connection or love.
I agree.
And I do something like similar to that. I do a lot. I'm an artist now, and I do a lot of painting. And two things: if I don't paint, like if I decide, well, I don't need to paint today, I start to get a little bit. I don't feel quite so good inside. I'm a little bit off. I'm off center. And I know that when I do paint, when I step up to the easel, it is like that guy washing the dishes, for Bill Murray. It almost doesn't even matter what comes off of the brush onto canvas. Just the act of being there deliberately, and for me it's painting, is a profound act of spiritual connection and love, devotion, really. And it could be, for someone else, that could be gardening. For another person, that could be playing music or dance, whatever that is. That one thing that so many people discount as being just trivial, it really isn't. It can really put you in that state of loving connection. It doesn't have to be sitting in meditation for hours and hours on end. If you want to do that, that's cool.
Fine.
But it doesn't have to be that way. Each person is going to have some things that are uniquely his or hers that can put you in that state of connection or flow. But you can intend it just to even be washing the dishes or doing the laundry or taking the dog out.
Well, that's the part that I got, that no matter what it is that you do it from a contributing mindset.
Yep.
When you're looking to do it to make a difference to it, that is causing you to have a state of mind that is chemically causing your well-being to occur. You're calm, you're relaxed, you feel accomplishment, you get a sense of being that's totally different. Doesn't matter what you do, if you do it from that perspective, from that way of being.
One of the things I think of is the way we do anything is the way we do everything.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's why it doesn't matter what you're talking about. So it could be dishes, it could be anything, but the way we do anything is the way we do everything.
Yep.
So what we're really talking about here, though, I think, is present moment awareness.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
When we come into the present moment, that's where love and joy exists.
Right.
Oh, we think it exists out there. Oh, when I make another dollar, when I get married, when I have a baby, when I buy a house. If we think love and joy exists out there, we're constantly chasing and we're never getting, and therefore we're feeling unwell. And what we need to do is come into the present moment, be aware. Whatever we're doing, as long as we're fully immersed in the present moment and we're aware, then we're tapping into that space that Nancy's been to, which is that pure love, joy. Also, I'm wondering, though, if we might want to use the word well-being.
Yep.
Because in a way, it's deeper to me. A sense of well-being, I think, is what you shifted to, Nancy. Get from a state of anxiety, which is painful, to a deep knowing that you are okay, that you are safe, that even something like sickness, death, these are illusions. And that if we stay in this present moment, we are safe, even as dragged under a truck. By the way, Nancy was a bicyclist when this happened. You didn't mention that. And when you were on the operating table and when you were recovering, somehow you were able to stay in that present moment, be aware, and somehow have a sense of safety as you went through that. And I think that's was your transformation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a good point.
We really don't recommend that, but what we do recommend is going to the dishes when we get done and putting all of your awareness into that dish, doing it to feel good with a sense of accomplishment, and not be distracted by all the worries that we are programmed to have and that our brain develops through the years. If we focus on that dish, we put everything there, we will feel so good, we'll feel so calm. Dishes are done, we feel great.
Yeah.
If we maintain that state, we transition to the next activity that we're in. And this, I think, is where people can start. Nancy said something very beautiful earlier on, which is if you could wake up in the morning and decide that your contribution is to yourself, that's equally valuable. The way we do anything is the way we do everything. If we value ourselves and we wake up in the morning and say, how do I contribute to myself having a better day? And if you go to wash that dish and say, I'm going to go into sleep right now and I'm going to experience joy because I'm going to be present moment aware, I think there's a lot of value in that. I don't think you necessarily have to remove it from yourself to have the cleanest dish. Nancy's correct that happiness is a feeling that is fleeting, like sadness. You talked about a friend passing away. You're going to feel sadness. If you get beautiful flowers, you're going to feel happy. But these are fleeting emotions. And I think the transformative process comes from something much deeper than that emotional state, which is why we talk about consciousness, something separate from our emotions. Our emotions are always changing, but our consciousness, our space of awareness is not changing.
Yeah.
And that's why I agree that we should not get trapped in a happiness trap, because that will be a mirage and we'll keep slipping away. What we're looking for is what Nancy touched upon, which is difficult and most people haven't gotten there, is that sense of sort of overabundance of love, of connection. For others, I think maybe who aren't quite there, trying to strive towards a sense of well-being.
Yeah.
Right? The opposite of feeling unsafe is a sense of well-being. And when we stay in the moment, right? As Eckhart Tolle taught us, come in the moment. Are you safe? Is everybody you love safe in this exact moment? Not where will they be later? And then you can really have a profound experience.
Yeah.
What Nancy shows us is even when we believe we're unsafe, being dragged under a truck, being in the operating room, Nancy has had an experience where she was able to feel something different in those moments. Can you share that with us, Nancy?
Yeah, I mean that was coming up as you were talking about this. That memory of when I wasn't in the middle of the accident, when the accident was happening, is when I had this first. It was kind of my first mini awakening of what you just talked about, of that deep state of consciousness that exists separate from emotion. So during the accident, I was on a bike and I was hit broadside by a truck, and eventually dragged underneath the truck for a while. But during that time, when I first hit the pavement, I came down and hit the pavement with my left side. My consciousness, what I would call my soul consciousness or higher consciousness, kind of popped out of my body, which was a very unusual experience for me at the time. I had no concept of being able to watch events happen from outside of I was in my body and outside at the same time. I was in two places at once, which really freaked me out, but I was more freaked out by what was going on. However, what I noticed and took away from that initially was, well, wait a minute, this human me that's under the truck, that's being dragged under the truck at the time, is just in a state of fear and panic. And that's all it was. It was this, that wheel of panic, fear state.
Right.
But that part of me that was outside watching all of this was very, very calm and at peace, knowing that everything was going to be perfectly fine. Everything was going to be okay. And of course, there was this I had this almost like an argument with myself, these two
Mm,
parts of me, those two levels of consciousness. You know, my human self was like, how can you possibly think that? I'm underneath this truck. I'm getting run, I could die in a second or two. But yet that higher level of my awareness kept saying, no, this is perfectly fine, just the way it is. Yeah, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of pain right now, but everything is going to be a-okay. And that state, that separation of my human level of like that, you know, the ego mind, or that what I call it, the monkey
right.
mind, separated from that higher level of awareness, was that first inkling that I had that things could be different. And then those two viewpoints came back together. But then later, you know, after the NDE happened while I was in surgery. My back was really, really busted up, folks. And so I needed some surgery in order to kind of get my back in place, and they implanted some titanium so that I could walk again. But after that, you know, thinking about all that had happened and all that I experienced just within the accident part itself, that's when I knew, you know, and coupling that with what I learned during my NDE, that everything was really just love or connection, or that positive state, that joyful state, that then it was always that choice. You know, while I was laying there in the hospital, I think I mean, my friends would say, you just look like you're so happy and you're so blissed out and you're so joyful. I'm like, yeah, because we're all love and we're all connected and I just love everybody. You know, I was so grateful at everyone who walked. I was just in this constant state of gratitude, not really for being alive. A lot of people might think that. It was the state of gratitude for having seen firsthand that immense connection that we all have
Yeah.
to that love centered or positively centered energy that is this universe. That's what I was grateful for. And what I deliberately did from there on out is I used that gratitude as the way that I started my day. I still do this, by the way. It's been over 7 years, almost 8 years now. But gratitude, really deeply getting into gratitude, not just, you know, like, oh yeah, I'm glad I have a house. It's really spending even just a few minutes for me in the morning, getting realigned with that state of gratitude, which is really another form of that loving connection. Aligning myself with that in a deep way gets me going on that right path. It helps me decide, okay, so today I am going to be in alignment with that love in my life, whatever that looks like, you know, and it's different for everybody. But for me, aligning myself deeply with gratitude first thing.
Can you
eh,
walk us through that specifically, what that might look like?
Yeah, so well, what I used to do initially was I would remember, you know, seeing all those connections of energy, but typically I would be so grateful at just in the morning before I got out of bed, like I can actually feel my feet. Like there was a time there during the accident where I thought I was going to be a quadriplegic, you know. So just the mere act, I closed my eyes and I just thought about, oh my gosh, you know, I can actually feel my feet and I can get up and walk and I can go on a walk today. How awesome is that? Like, there are people who can't get up and walk today, and I am gifted with the ability to get up and go for a walk. How cool is that? You know, and I can get up and I can take care of myself. Like that was a concern too at first. There are people who have to have caregivers with them all the time, who can't take care of themselves, who can't make their decisions. And so they need that extra level of help, which is where they are. But I would just put myself in that place of close my eyes, think about two or three things that if I didn't have them in that moment would really profoundly impact my life in a negative way. But then I would just switch that around in my mind and say, you know, I am so grateful that I can get up today and I can work both of my legs and go out for a walk, even if it's a short walk, you know, or I have a warm, beautiful house to live in. It's not huge, you know, it's not something that's going to be an architectural digest, but I like my house and I'm so glad that I have my house. And some people don't have a home. And while you know, I might feel sad for that, what I'm doing is I'm putting myself in that place of gratitude for what I do have in that moment. And it's really just closing my eyes and allowing myself to feel it rather than think it. Because thinking only goes so far. So I've kind of perfected the ability to just try to feel where that ends up in my body. Typically for me, it feels like it's that gratitude is centered here in my heart area. And so I just allow myself to focus on that deeply for even just a few moments. What that does is it puts me, I start smiling even though I don't really intend to. I start smiling because I'm in a place of love then. And that love is what then kind of transforms my morning. I get back aligned to that love if I have somehow, you know, overnight gotten out of it. It just realigns me with that just by spending, again, it's just a few minutes in that intentional space of deep gratitude. People could be grateful for their kids or their pets, or you know, you might not like your job, but you've got a job and it pays the more than pays the bills. And, you know, you get to send your kids to a good school because of it. It may not be what you want to do for the rest of your life, but that's okay. You know, you can at least be grateful for that income that you do have so that you can then spend some time working on what comes next. There are so many things that we have that we can be grateful for. You know, I spent when I was in my early 20s, I spent some time in this country of Amman, of Jordan, and near the town, near the city of Amman. And part of what we did there, it was when I was in school. We spent some time working with the refugee camp. This was the Palestinian refugee camps that were from, I think, the 1967 war. And what we did there, we just helped people learn English. That's all we did. And this was the first time in my life, and I was getting in my early 20s, where I saw people who were profoundly, profoundly poverty stricken. Like I'd never experienced that in my life. My family was not wealthy growing up, but we were not poverty stricken like these people were. You know, there'd be a family of 6 or 8 living in a small home that was maybe, I don't know, 15 feet by 15 feet. And it could be several generations in there. It could be grandma, parents, and kids too. So and they had really nothing. I mean, didn't have the material goods that we have, but they had something that a lot of us here in the West don't. They had a profound sense of gratitude and happiness and joy. So it was more than happiness. They were the most joyful people I swear I had met to that point, and they had nothing material-wise that we do. And that was the first moment where I thought, well, you don't have to have all of this stuff in order to have a really joy-filled life. These people were honestly full of centeredness, that present moment awareness, and absolute joy. And that was the first time I'd seen that.
Right. And one of the things we've done in our society here is we've isolated ourselves, particularly in the
Right.
pandemic. And what you're talking about is us all being interconnected. Therefore, we need one another.
Right.
So in our society where we've built our own homes and we're living alone and we have all this space, we've robbed ourselves of that connection. And we forget the human connection really does trump everything. We remember it every time there's a disaster, right? Every time a house burns down or a house floods down, then everybody rushes in, loves and supports one another. but then we all go back to our separate dwellings, and that sense of isolation and loneliness comes back. And I think that's why you were seeing so much joy in those communities,
Yeah.
because they had one another. Of gratitude for being alive, for having one another, for having food that day, because gratitude is a function of perspective, and your perspective changed radically after your accident and near-death experience.
Right.
And for all of us, we want to try to tap into a sense of gratitude before something like that reminds us.
Right.
How many of us get up every single day on our 2 feet and never once think, gee, I'm grateful for the ability to do that? I think probably most people don't think of that until something happens like you had happened.
Right.
And people living over there in Jordan, they probably are very grateful when they wake up, and they're grateful if they have shoes on their feet. And so if what you're saying is that gratitude is the doorway to love, the more gratitude we have, the more love we can experience. The more love we can experience, the better our lives will be. And so materialism, because one of the questions I've been really eager to ask Nancy is, Nancy, I've heard about your accident, I heard about your recovery. How do you think that you were able to get through such a physically traumatic event so rapidly and so completely? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, that's a good question to bring up. And I haven't talked, again, that's something I haven't talked about too much in these interviews. So that's a good topic for us to dive into. So just as a little bit of a background for those people who haven't listened, yeah, I had, as you can imagine, being hit by a truck, I had, I think it was like 24 or 25 bones that were broken and in multiple places. So most of the trauma was to my neck and back. And the estimate was that I had well over, they stopped counting bone fractures at 100. So I don't know how many individual fractures there were, but it was a lot. And my lower spine and my neck were the two parts that were really in bad shape. Like all of the bones in my neck were fractured in several places. So it was pretty dicey whether I'd ever be able to walk again. And then my lower back was just a mess. It was L1 vertebrae was almost effectively gone. It was pretty well shattered. So I fully expected to be laid up for many, many, many months. They were talking about, it's not that they were trying to scare me, but they wanted to be realistic. Like, this could be 6 months of really limited mobility, or none at all. If I chose not to have the surgery, I would be laying flat on my back in a hospital bed for at least 6 months, probably more like 9, just to heal everything up. So what eventually happened, so they put the rods in my back so I could move around and walk. Luckily, nothing was wrong with my legs. My legs were fine. I, for some reason, didn't break any leg bones, which was awesome. So I was able to get up and walk I had one of those clamshell, like hard plastic braces on. I kind of looked like an oyster or something in that thing. It was crazy. But it kept me straight. It kept me healing, upright. But I went into my doc, so they let me out of the hospital after 2 weeks. And I went back into the doctors at like 4.5 weeks post accident, which isn't very long. And we went, they did some scans. I don't remember if that was, I think they did CT scans at that point too. Again, another set. And I'll never forget the look it was the nurse practitioner's face. And then the physician assistants for my surgeon came out and they're like, well, you're really well healed up. You don't need, like, they were really shocked that they were saying this. They're like, it's 4.5 weeks and you don't need your casts anymore. Like, they couldn't believe that they were saying this. And I couldn't believe that they were saying it because it should have been minimum 16. That's usually how long it takes before they let you get all this. And I had neck braces on too. And like, I was healed up pretty much within 4.5 weeks, which was crazy. Now, granted, I was taking good care of my body. I was eating healthfully. Up until that point, I was very active as a cyclist. So I was in pretty good shape. Um, but but I don't think that can account for the rapid healing. And I could say, well, the angelic guide that I met while I was dead might have done something, and she might have. But I think what it was is not only during my NDE being profoundly thrown back into that state of divine love and just immersed in it. I think it was sort of like a healing bath, really, in a way. Uh, being put back into that healing state. When I woke up in the recovery room, I didn't have any pain, and not just because of the drugs. So when I stopped taking pain meds right away, like I didn't need them anymore, and the docs were like trying to push these pills on me because, like, you were just hit by a truck. You need to be on opiates. I'm like, no, not really, thanks. I don't really need that stuff because I don't hurt anymore.
Were you in any state of fear?
Not for my physical body. I had some, like, for maybe the first couple of days, I had some concerns about my job and my financial state. Like, the woman that hit me was destitute. She had no money. She had no insurance. So
Right.
that
But
was really the only thing I was concerned
so,
about was
so
like, how am I going to pay my bills?
would you think that it might have been more difficult to heal if you were in a state of upset and
Oh,
fear?
sure. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's a very good physical reason for that too. When you're in that fearful state, this, Eva, as well as I do, your body is just flooded with all those nasty little stress hormones that,
that's right. That's right.
keep you on edge. I was basically fearless for the most part. I mean, I knew that I'd be okay financially. It was, I'd get my job back and, it'd be okay eventually. But I didn't have any fears about, my own well-being. Like, I knew I was okay. I knew that it might take some time to process what I had gone through. But I knew that it was the right thing for me to do. Like, I knew even right away that I couldn't deny what had happened, that I had to just roll with it, that I had to learn from it and make that a part of me in order to really heal and become whole from this. And I think that, first being without fear, but also immersing myself daily in that love practice,
Love.
that gratitude practice. So
Yeah,
doing both of those things,
yeah.
being without fear and
Were,
intentionally aligning myself with love,
were
helped me
you
heal.
in the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, even in the hospital, I was that way.
So
I would just lay there. I remember laying there for hours, just in this state of absolute gratitude and bliss. And I would have this happened, every day. The housekeeper would come in, and it'd be usually a different one every day. And I'd just watch the housekeeper do her work, and I'd like have tears flowing down my cheeks at just how it still chokes me up today, like how deliberately and how lovingly she did something like, clean the bathroom or take the trash out or
yes,
change
yes.
the sheets on the bed. Like, she just really, that was her way of giving back, even though she wasn't. It sort of bothered me that she wasn't the most respected person in the hospital, because she contributed just as much
Exactly.
as any of the doctors in that hospital did.
It's
Fearless as
good
you
to be
can be.
fearless, and it's good to be grateful. That combination
Yep,
is a blessing,
it is.
and you got that. You got
Yeah.
that blessing.
And it can be a gradual process for people to get there. It doesn't have to be
No.
all at once.
No, well, I can't say this was just Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.